In this video, we'll dive a little deeper into new CSS3 background properties and values, and explore ways we can layer multiple background images, adjust their size, and control how far they visibly extend. Let's get started. With the multiple background CSS3 feature, we can build multi-layered backgrounds using the background property. Creating multiple background images is as easy as separating each background value with a comma. So let's take a look at a simple example. In our browser, we can see that so far we only have this textured background image applied to a div with the class sketch-img. So let's add another image layer on top of that. We'll go ahead and add this transparent PNG of a pencil. To layer this image above the texture, we'll need to add it before the texture image value in our CSS. So in our style sheet, let's add a comma before the value. Then in front of that, we'll go ahead and add the new pencil image. We'll give it a background repeat of no repeat, and we will give it a position value of left bottom. Make sure that there is no semicolon after this first value, just a comma. So we'll go ahead and save this, and when we refresh the browser, there we see our pencil image layered above the texture. So let's add one more image layer to our background. This time, we'll add a transparent smiley face image. So again, in our CSS, I'll add the comma before the value here, then the new image value in front of it. I'll also give it a value of no repeat and a position of right top. We'll refresh this, and now we see our new smiley image in the top right corner. It's important to remember that the first image listed will be the top image layer rendered, and the last image listed will be at the very bottom, like our texture image here. Any image in between the two will be layered in subsequent order. So if you list a fully opaque image or color with no transparency first, it will cover up all images behind it. So let's keep that in mind. Now that we have the images layered this way, we can easily control the composition of our background. So for example, I can change the top value here to bottom and the bottom value to top. And just like that, the composition of our background has changed. We're also able to set the size of our background images using the background size property. We can set the size using length values, percentages, or with the two new keywords, cover and contain. Like the background property, background size can accept multiple comma-separated values that set the background size of each image. So here, 200 pixels will set the size for the first image listed, our smiley image. We'll add a comma and follow it with the value 250 pixels, which sets the size to the second image of our pencil. Then another comma followed by 110%, which sizes the textured image. So as you can see, the values follow the exact same order as our layered background images. We'll save this out, and when we refresh the browser, now we can see how the image sizes adjust based on the values we provided. When we use percentages in our values, keep in mind that the percentage values are relative to the width and height of the entire background positioning area, not the width and height of the background image itself. So for example, we'll change these values here. Our first value, we'll make it 30%, and our second value will be 40%. We'll keep the third one at 110%. So when we refresh this, the smiley image is now 30% the size of the entire background area, and the pencil image is 40%. We can add a second value to each set of background sizes. The first value sets the width, and the second value sets the height. If we only include one value, the second value will be set to auto, which is the initial value. Also, keep in mind that negative values are not permitted. We'll go ahead and make this 50% and 45%. So here we're setting a width of 250 pixels and a height of 200 pixels for the smiley image, and a width of 50% and a height of 45% for our pencil image. We'll refresh that, and now our top two images are slightly different in size. And now in our CSS, again, we can change our position values to adjust the composition. So as you can see, this is a great feature because we don't need to go into Photoshop or any graphics editor to adjust the image, save it, and replace. We can do it all in the style sheet. We can also add the background size values to the shorthand property. For example, we can do this by using a / in between the background position and background size values, followed by the background repeat value. This is great, but at the time of this recording, some browsers like Safari and Firefox do not support these values in the shorthand property. Besides the length and percentage values, the background size property has two new keyword values that ensure our background images will display entirely at a scaled size. So this is really good for creating full-page background images. So I'll quickly add a new rule here for our next example. And I'll open this in a new HTML page so that we can clearly see how this works. So here we have a new page containing the background images we just declared in our new rule. And as you've probably noticed, the image appears too large. Parts of the images are being cut off, and it does not scale to fit the size of the browser window. So things could be much better here. A good solution would be to scale the image to make it fit within different window sizes while still preserving its original proportions. Well, we can do just that with the new cover and contain keyword values. So in our new HTML rule here, we'll go ahead and add the background size property, followed by the value cover. The cover value fills the entire background positioning area, which in this case is our HTML element. When we refresh the browser, we can see how cover adjusts the image to completely contain the browser window and scales it so that both its width and height can display proportionately as a full page background image. When you do this, just make sure that the height value in your rule is set to 100%. In a similar way, the value contain will scale the image so that the entire image fits inside the background area while keeping its original aspect ratio. So when we refresh, we can see the entire image here, but there's also these surrounding white areas that are not completely covered by the image. In the markup for this new page, notice that we have a div with the class box, and there's also some text commented out, but we'll get to that shortly. So in our CSS, I'll go ahead and change the HTML selector in our rule to select our box div. I'll also add a width, the value of 700 pixels, and I will adjust the height to 500 pixels. I'll also add a little bit of padding here. And finally, I'll go ahead and add a border style. So a 15 pixel solid border and an RGBA blue value, and a 60% alpha transparency value. Now, when we refresh, we can see the image is now a background of our box div, but once again, it's too large for the containing area, which is set to 700 by 500 pixels. No worries though, because we already know that background size cover will take care of this and adjust the image for us. So now we see that the background image proportionately covers the entire background area. And even if the size of the containing div resizes dynamically with a percentage width value, we can see that the image will also be resized while maintaining its proportions. But we're still seeing parts of the background image show through our transparent borders. Now, if that's the effect you're going for, then it's fine. But if it isn't, we can use the background clip property to take care of that. So in our CSS, we'll go ahead and add the background clip property here. So background clip sets the background painting area. So it determines whether the background position is relative to the border, padding, or content area of the element. So it simply tells the browser how far the background should visibly extend. We know that a background is everything in the elements box except for the margins. Background clip lets us adjust that with the values border box, padding box, and content box. Border box is the default value. The background is clipped to the border area of our div. So as we can see, nothing really changes here. With content box, the background is clipped to the content of our div. So as we can see, the background is not displaying any of the border or padding areas of the box and only in this content area. In the HTML file, I'll go ahead and uncomment this text so we can see the actual content. Notice how the image is clipped to the text because the text in the div is part of the content area. And we're seeing this 30 pixel gap around each side of the image because the div has a padding of 30 pixels on each side. So it's omitting that space from the background painting area. The value padding box sets the background within the padding area. So the background is removed from any of the border areas and no part of the image shows behind the transparent borders. So this is very useful when using transparency in your borders. Remember that these values also apply to background colors. They're not only for images. Similar to the background clip property, the background origin property determines how a background position is calculated. The three values background origin accepts are exactly the same as the values we just used for background clip. So for this example, I'll quickly remove the center position here, and I will change our background size from cover to contain. Now remember, contain scales the image to the largest size it can be while preserving its original proportions so that the entire image fits the background. So that's why we're seeing this white space area to the right here. But that's fine as long as we understand how background origin works. So let's go over the values. With the value border box, the position is relative to the border edge. So as we can see here, the image is behind the borders. With padding box, the position is relative to the padding edge. So now, again, the image extends to the edge of the padding area. And with content box, the background is displayed
within the content area. So now it's again relative to the content edge of our box. Keep in mind that if the background attachment value for the image is set to fixed, then this property will have no effect.
These new background properties are very well supported in modern browsers. In upcoming videos, we'll continue bridging the gap between design and code when we learn how to create gradient backgrounds with CSS. See you guys soon!